Garrett Blevins here. I wanted to talk about beginning powerlifting programs. The goal of this video and possibly video series, we'll see how long it is and if I have to break it up, is to teach people the basic principles that underlie almost all powerlifting programs. There's a lot of great programs out there. They all have different training philosophies. There's what's called Americanized programs by some people, which has very low volume, a lot of PRs week to week, and it's very focused on immediate progress. There's other programming which is a little bit more what's often called Russian programming or Bulgarian programming, that's volume oriented, that slowly builds a tremendous base that's then built upon up to PRs, but not something you're going to be setting every week. Both have created some great lifters, both work, but all of them function with some of the same principles, and that's what I want to talk about today. As this video goes further, I may try to tie it into how what's this chart up here, it's called Prilepin's chart, how that ties into the cube method that Brandon Lilly has put out, and how I utilize this chart when deciding how to modify programs to my own needs. So let me start by explaining this chart. It's been around forever. I believe it was created by a Russian Olympic lifting coach originally, and it's based around producing strength gains. We'll talk about some of the percentages and why powerlifters may not go down. You see here up in this first box, 55%. That's pretty low, though there's even a place for that in powerlifting programs. So let me explain the chart first. As I've called it, there are 4 different types of protocols, and they have different percentages. This percent in the varying degrees is based off of your 1 rep max. Now, just my own advice to you, we all have great gym PRs. If I were you, and in my own life, I try not to count any PRs that have terrible form. There's always going to be some aspect of form breakdown when you do a max lift for a single, but it should be within a fairly small degree of divergence from your normal form. It should be good form, and it shouldn't be something where you're doubled over in your squat and you end up good morning it up. Don't count that. Count your PRs that have good form, and then when you use your program, don't use your actual 1 rep max. I would advise, as Brandon Lilly has, to use 95% of your 1 rep max. And so from now on, when I refer to percentages, I am referring to a percent of 95% of my 1 rep max, which Brandon Lilly, the inventor of the cube method, calls your 365 strong number. So for protocol 1, you're going to have fairly light weights. You're going to be doing, for the exercise, let's say it's a bench press, 3 to 6 sets with a weight. Maybe it's 3 to 6 sets with 55%. Maybe it's 6 sets with 65%. Maybe it's 3 with 55, 3 with 65. You can add all kinds of variety. The optimal total rep range, the number of repetitions that you perform for the day, should be 24 on protocol 1. What that means, 6 sets of 4. 6 times 4 is 24, and that would give you kind of the quote-unquote magic number for the day. 3 times 8, 24. So if you're doing only 3 sets, you should do 8 repetitions of these weights. The total range that you should stay in, if you're not going to hit that 24, let's say maybe you decided to do 5 sets of 5, 25 total reps for the day, it's still within the acceptable range. Additionally, if you look here, if you look at the 3, if you did 3 sets of 10, you're going to end up with that upper rep range. As you can see, there are various ranges for the various weeks. You're not going to be doing 30 reps of 90 plus, unless you're doing some sort of crazy shock week. We'll talk about micro and macro training cycles and how you might think about incorporating a week. You wouldn't be doing 30, maybe you'd be doing 8 reps of a heavy 90 plus weight to shock yourself. But there's what we're going to talk about first is the microcycle. For the purposes of this discussion, microcycles are going to refer to an 8 to 12 week cycle. So, back to the protocols. Protocol 2, higher percentage, 70 to 80%, same amount of sets per week, but a lower optimal range. The range for optimal is lower because the weight is heavier. So instead of shooting for around 24 reps on each exercise, 24 reps of bench press on a certain day, you'd be shooting for 18 reps. Likewise, as the percentage increases, shoot for 15, 3 by 5 would be really good here, 3 sets of 5. Even a 4 by 4 would be a good time to do this. 4 by 4 with something between 80 to 90 is what that's talking about. And then you have we would probably term this a max effort day, where you're going above 90% for 1 to 2 sets, optimal of 4, rep range 1 to 10. So, as we look at this, if this is going to be our kind of max effort week, this would probably turn into our speed week. And these here are more of your rep weeks. But this is only for the purposes of generalizations. If you ended up doing, let's say, 6 sets of 4, that's kind of speed work, but speed work is often done with singles or doubles and maybe even triples. When I was using Westside method, I would do 9 sets of 3. 9 times 3, 27. You can see that the overall, if I was doing 9 sets of 3 reps, that's going to be 27 total reps, which puts me in this rep range. So that's why I'm calling it speed. However, as you can see, the 9 sets, there's nowhere on this chart where there's ever going to be a 9 set sort of idea. And I'm going to talk about speed work and how a speed day and a rep day can kind of just be flip-flopped. So let's say instead, if we were following the chart as it's written, we're doing, let's say we want to do 3 sets with this percent range, and we're shooting at the end to get in between 18 to 30. So let's say we decide, I'm going to do 3 sets of 10. Okay, so 3 sets of 10 for 30 total reps at 55%. Okay, so this is looking very much like a hypertrophy, almost bodybuilding day. I mean, it's only 3 sets, but it's in that, 10 to 12 rep range. That's going to be building muscle, not so much as building strength. Those are not, absolutely, there's overlap between building muscle and building strength. It's probably, if we think about Venn diagrams, if we think about, building muscle and building strength, anything in the 10 to 12 rep range is going to be strongly in this overlapping area. It's really hard to just build muscle and not build any strength at all. In fact, it's more of the focus of what you're trying to do. If you build a bigger muscle is going to be a stronger muscle. But powerlifting is about how much of your muscle fiber can you recruit into a single moment, a single burst of energy for a bench press or a squat or a deadlift. And so the focus on strength, which is the amount of force that you can produce in the smallest amount of time, is going to be what we're looking for. However, the more muscle you have, the more potential strength you can have. That doesn't always necessarily hold true if all of your muscle has not been trained to function for strength. I'm not going to get any more in depth about that today, but I don't think there's anything wrong at all with a 3 by 10. In fact, a lot of Ed Cohen's periodizations, the first weeks will have, he'll have 2 exercises, so you might have a regular bench and a close grip bench for 2 sets of 10 for the first week. This is something that's very important, especially for beginners. Build a base and have some sets of 10 in there. All that to say, if you swap the sets and the reps, you can turn a rep day into a speed day with these lower percentages. This week especially, which is why I call it a speed week. that set of 10 might tax you if you had to do 10 repetitions at 55%. But if you switch it and you're doing 10 sets of 3 with 55%, I guarantee you those 3 reps not really going to tax you with 55% of your 1 rep max. Now, if you shorten your rest periods where maybe you only have 45 seconds in between each set, by the time you get to set number 10, those 3 reps might start to get a little hard. That's possible. But if you wanted to turn this kind of rep day, 3 sets of 10, into a speed day, 10 sets of 3, you can do so on protocol 1. And we'll talk about the place of speed within a program in a microcycle. We'll get there in a minute. Let me talk briefly, not to beat a dead horse, but about these rep days. Pretty much you want to think, I think even in the higher rep ranges, you see this goes to 24 as well. The optimal for week 1 is 24, but the range goes up to 30. The optimal for these percentages is 18, but you can go up to 24. There's a difference of opinion on that about how high the volume should go, especially when you're focusing on a rep day or a building day. All I know is that Ed Cohn, he loved 5x5s. He especially loved just sets of 5. He always, there's an interview with him. I can't remember who it's with, but he talks about, I'll put a link in the description to it. I'll have to search it out on YouTube. But he talks about the further he gets away from his 5s, the further he gets away from that strength building part of his program. And so every cycle he would go back and get away from doubles and triples and get back into his sets of 5s because he believed that that was going to build a deep base of strength. So, as you can see, 3 sets of 5 would put you close to this 18. 3 sets of 5 would put you right on this. But again, the rep range here, you could have more sets. You could do 6 sets of 3. I end up doing a lot of 6 sets of 3. That's part of the volume protocol I talk about. 6 by 3, which is going to give you a total of 18 reps for the day. But that's a great volume number because you're going to be able to use a higher percentage. Let's say you're doing 80% of your 1 rep max for 18 reps instead of 55% of your 1 rep max for 24. I guarantee you the volume on those is going to be really close together. Even though you're doing more reps, you're doing it at a lighter weight. And so a 3x6 is a really good way to do it. Also, a 4x4 is a good number. That's something that would be some solid training, definitely a heavy day that would tax you, especially if you're doing, sets of 4 between 80 to 90. That's going to be a hard day. So I call these rep days. These are going to be really good for building strength. As you go down this, you go from building, the focus being on building muscle or building speed, to building absolute strength in a 1 rep sort of scenario. The heavier the weight is, the closer it is to what you're going to be doing in competition. And you're training your body as you up the weights to be able to exert maximal force. However, you cannot exert maximal force in an optimal manner if you haven't learned the form of the lift. And learning the form of the lift is always going to happen at lower percentages. 1, because it's easier to think when the weight is lighter. You're able to control your body more. And your weak points aren't going to show themselves as much when you have the lighter weight. And when you're training your body to have that form ingrained into your central nervous system so everything knows where to go automatically, you're going to do that with the higher rep ranges, with the lighter weights, so that you're not going to get injured if you do something wrong, or at least you have a lot less likelihood of getting injured. As you move through your program, though, through the microcycle, you're going to get down to where you're doing heavy work. The heavy work is where you take all of the building that you've done with the first 3 protocols and you're turning it into real strength. So, we're going to talk about the microcycle next. I'll see you in a minute.